Hi everyone and welcome along. Today we're going to paint a lovely spring window box. So grab your paints and let's get started. So I've started this by drawing a 6 centimetre line across the bottom and then doing basically making a rectangular shape going up about 7 centimetres on either side, and then just at the bottom I just created a little sort of fluted window box shape, and then at the top I'm going to turn this window into a sort of nice curved arch of a window. So I'm going to use a compass and I'm going to just find the central point and make a nice little arch like that. And now I'm going to just create the sort of the detail on the inside of the window pane. So I'm just going to sort of freehand, I'm going to take like a little bit either side, just do a little sort of thin sliver of a line. And then if you wanted, you could get your compass back and just place it just slightly lower on the dot and get a small curve like that. This is just to get the sort of recess of the window inside the wall, and then I'm going to make a sort of broader window pane, a wooden window frame. Well, please excuse the dogs if they start barking, they're a little bit vocal this morning. And now I'm just going to just get those curves in a little bit more freehand. And then I think I need to make my my circle just a little bit smaller and get it down a bit lower. Is that going to work? Yeah, it'll work roughly. There we go. And I'm now going to just put in some window pane uprights, and I'm just doing this by eye. I'm not measured it, but that looks all right. And then I'm going to do some horizontals, so we're going to just do some parallel lines down there, and then we are good to start painting. Now I've got my sketch, I'm just going to lightly rub it out with a putty rubber just to sort of remove some of the heavier pencil. That's what makes life a lot easier for rubbing out pencil afterwards. Now I've got some dilute shadow mixed up from burnt sienna and Payne's grey, and I've also got some buff titanium, which is a Daniel Smith fine watercolour colour, which is a very pale creamy colour. And what I'm going to do is I'm first going to paint in the brickwork on the wall. Now it's going to be very sort of gentle, it's not going to be too heavy. I've got a size 2 brush, and what I'm going to do is going to angle my brush down from the side, and I've just used the sort of starting point of where the curve comes in, and I'm creating a sort of brick shape that's going to sort of fade off into nothing. I'm going to get a little bit more Payne's grey on its own there as well, and I'm just going to drop a little bit into the mix there, and now I'm going to paint another one. This time I've got a bit of just the shadow mix. I'm sort of using the buff titanium and the shadow mix together. And the idea is with these sort of wet colours you can create a nice sort of sense of a wall around the edge of the window, because this is one of those sort of stylized illustrations where the wall is going to sort of disappear. It's going to fade away into not very much. So I've chosen to do my bricks like this, so quite sort of large stone ones. What's really important is that we do them nice and dilute, because we're going to be painting some nice flowers in our window box, and we want them to be able to sort of be painted in quite nice and easily without fighting the brickwork around the edge. I've decided I'm not using masking fluid because I like to try and teach a painting style that doesn't always rely on it. So now I'm coming around the bottom and I'm going to be painting bricks, but of course there's going to be a bit of shadow sort of coming in there. Still using my size 2 brush. They don't have to be sort of even sized bricks, depends what kind of a window, what kind of a wall that you're painting into, but I think just try and keep it nice and light. If you wanted, you could just do a general wash sort of around this wall, not worry about brickwork at all. But anyway, I'm going to just go all the way around, and then we'll look at how we do a nice arched brickwork. With arched windows like this, you tend to get tapered stones coming out around the top, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give us a little helping hand with a little guide like that. So again, just making the compass just a little bit bigger to make that larger circle, but going from that same central point. And I am going to paint a tapered brick from the center. That's the important one. So these ones I'm painting them fully rather than just bleeding out and fading to the edges. And then I'm going to continue painting more stones. So you just got to make sure that the width at the top is greater than the width at the bottom, so that they taper in nicely. If you want, you can sort of pre-plan them and draw them in, but like I say, I'm not too worried. And what you do tend to get sometimes is you get like a stone that hasn't quite reached the edge like that. Paint that in. And then we can just do one little extra sliver, just like that. Because I'm painting everything on without using masking fluid, the next thing I'm going to go for is I'm going to start painting flowers in the window box. Now I also painted the window box in the same sort of light colours that I did the stone in, and now I've got sap green, green gold and cadmium yellow all woken up, and I'm going to begin with some sort of nice light tones, and I'm going to paint in a sort of loose depiction of some geraniums. So I'm starting with some sort of blobs of colour for leaves with my size 0 brush, and my aim is to sort of build up these basic shapes in light colours first. And you can see I'm just sort of creating a rounded, fairly sort of loose and slightly messy round shape. If you are really keen to learn how to paint geraniums in slightly more detail than this, then the best thing to do is to head over to my flowers and foliage playlist, and you will see a lovely, slightly more detailed miniature of a geranium. So I'm also sort of creating leaves in this kind of curved sort of smile shape, U shape, which is another sort of good way of depicting a leaf on a geranium, because they are these sort of wide style leaves. And I'll just have one or two sort of hanging down. We don't want it to be too sort of neat and symmetrical. And then I'm going to take a slightly smaller brush, 2/10, and I'm going to start to paint in some stems just protruding out, and you can see just why we painted in the stonework nice and delicately, because it means that we're very able to easily paint over the top. So I'm just linking some of these plants and leaves together, and then also just adding in new stems as well. But everything is sort of still quite wet, so it means that on the whole these lines all bleed into each other, which is great at this stage because we don't want it too defined. As it dries, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some sap green, and I'm now going to add some darker colour to this mound of green leaves, and you can see that the paint is just slowly starting to dry, which is great because it means now this green will just define itself a little bit more, because we're doing something slightly different with this piece today. We're going to be looking at shadow and light and shade. So this is going to be a sunny window box. Like I say, I think looking at the other sort of potted geranium tutorial I have will give you a great understanding of sort of the structure of this kind of flower. And now, with that all cleaned off, I'm going to take some cadmium red and some permanent rose and just mix them together to make just a slightly crimson red. And I'm going to start painting in some geranium flowers. And the beauty of this flower, especially in this style I'm painting it in, is it's a sort of series of a sort of cluster of dots at various stages in the piece. And what I want to do is not just have flowers sort of on the ends of the stems, I want to have them filling up in the gaps in and around the leaves. Now we've got the flowers painted in, we're going to look at the reflection of the window panes. So we're going to have a lovely blue sky, but we're also going to look at doing something rather interesting with a reflection of a tree that's outside of the window, sort of creating some shadow onto the wall. So what I'm going to do, I've got some cobalt blue deep here that I've diluted, and I'm just going to paint with my size 2 brush a wash into not all of the windows, but just to a section of them. And you can see that I'm purposefully not 100% filling the window pane with the wash. There are a few tiny bits of unpainted space, and that's just to every now and then have just a little bit of a highlight, a light reflection on the window. We don't want too much of it, but it just helps sort of tell the story of the piece, really. Give those little easy ways of making your painting seem just a little more realistic. While those dry, I'm going to fill in the other panes with some quite concentrated Payne's grey. This feels like a very counterintuitive, scary thing to be doing, but don't worry, this is going to be really cool once it's done. So we just want to try and keep it fairly dark. It doesn't matter if it's not like we don't want, you know, solid opaque watercolor. We're not painting in gouache. We're still enjoying some light and shade, and don't worry, I will talk you through how we paint around the flowers. I'm using a size 2 brush because it feels like it's sort of small enough for good control in the corners getting into the points, but large enough to get a good coverage. To paint in these fiddlier window panes, I just go down a size with the brush. I've gone down to a 2/10, and we just begin by doing the easy bit, I guess. Painting in that area, and then what I do is I sort of go close but not 100% right up to the edge of it, and just paint in with little brush strokes. But also, this is why those extra little bits of unpainted space on the window panes helps us in these moments to be nice and sort of consistent, I suppose, with the fact that we're going to have little bits of unpainted space hanging around here. But also, if you have a small enough brush, you can be fairly swift with it. It feels like it happens quite effectively without being too overly precious. And I chose geraniums because largely they sort of tumble down over the front, but also you could choose a flower or an arrangement that's much more solid and doesn't have all these sort of long extending stems, and that you'd essentially be just painting sort of around and over the top rather than lots of in-between fiddly bits like I'm doing. But I quite like the style, and I like it's just this slightly painterly stylized thing with these little bits of white, which I think is quite cool. The next stage is we need to make sure our sky blue has dried entirely. So we'll just give that one little bit more time, but in the meantime what I can do is I can actually paint Payne's grey into that little gap between the window pane and the wall to create just a nice sort of shady recess. So again, you'll have a little bit of fiddliness. But as you can see, don't worry, I'm just sort of doing it in a fairly sort of, I want to say a fairly flippant manner. I think I'm not being too rigid is the key here. Having got that all done and dry, I'm taking some concentrated Payne's grey now, and I'm going to now paint over the blue with a design that's going to look like the reflection of a tree in the reflection of the glass. So I'm sort of creating a sort of solid dark colour that then is going to have these leaves. And we're going to have them sort of coming down through the panes. So the colour can definitely sort of fade out a little bit and dilute a bit, but try and sort of don't be sort of just sort of creating a border edge, like have a bit sort of protruding down. Think about how tree branches do protrude out, and that means that it can then come down into the next. The next pane like that a little bit. And then remember we've got this, so we're going to be sort of coming up from the underside as well. And we just sort of end up filling in that section like that, and it's lovely because you've got that blue sky, but then you've got this lovely contrast of a shadow in the reflection. This is a new technique that I'm showing you here for me. I haven't done this on a tutorial before, so it's kind of cool to, I paint a lot of windows, but I haven't done like a reflection in a window like this, so it's nice for me as well, learning new things. So I'm just going to sort of continue that up, and then we'll get back to the rest of the piece. We're very nearly there, so I've just added a bit of burnt sienna into the blues in here, and what I want to do with a size 0 brush is I just want to add a little bit of sort of texture to the window pane, so I'll sort of keep it white essentially, but it's a sort of a bit whitewashed, I suppose. So it's just using that very dilute, sort of slightly warmer shadowy colour, and dry brushing it over the piece. We'll be adding shadow to everything in a bit, so this is just more about the texture of the wood. I mean, it could have been something we put on right at the beginning, but I was just waiting to sort of see what colours I'd go for, really. I don't have everything planned out 100% before I start a painting. I don't know if anyone's shocked to hear that, but yeah. Okay, we're going to let this all dry 100%, and this is also the point at which I would rub out the pencil, any pencil marks remaining. So I'm going to use a hard eraser to do that, and then we can add the last bits of shadow. With the pencil rubbed out, I'm going to add a little bit of low light colour to my geranium flowers. So I've got some alizarin crimson just mixed into the flower mix I had earlier, and I'm going to add some colour, just little like low light edges to the flowers, and I'll do that with the leaves as well. And it also means you can just sort of tidy things up a little bit if you want. I sort of tend to add lowlights to the lower half of the flower, which makes sense. because it's the area that's not going to get quite so much sunshine, and you can always add in a few shady extra little ones if you want. And we'll do a little bit to the leaves, just a little bit of low light to the leaves, and then we'll get the big shadow painted in. So for the little low lights on the leaves, I just added some of the Payne's Grey into my green leaf mix. And now all I'm going to do is I'm just going to mix up everything that was in my sort of shadowy palette here. And I want to add lots of water because I want a really dilute shadow mix now. This whole piece is dry, and we want to create now a sort of large shadow, sort of the larger shadow casting across the window. So a few sort of smaller things. We'll have a little curve of it down there, coming down the window panes. I've chosen a side there. And then now, with a larger brush, I'm going to paint in a shadow of a branch sort of coming down over the window, which is sort of going to reflect what we had reflected in the window. So this is just with a larger size 6 brush, and it always feels a bit scary to do it, but trust me, just keep that brush moving. Lots of light and shade on the piece by keeping it moving. And if you want to sort of create a bit of like a branch here or there, or you'll have like a more solid bit and then you've got your little branches just coming off, that's all good. But just keep the brush moving. And then what that means is that whole bit is going to come into darkness there. So I'll just have a little bit over the top and then a little flex. And a bit more darkness there. And then of course under the window box. But then of course we've got the shadow of the individual little bits here and there as well. So I might have a little bit of shadow just sort of up on the window box. And then one or two that will be a bit specific with. And there we have a very sunny and shadowy window box with geraniums. Thanks so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed that one. I want to say a massive thank you to my patrons and all our new patrons who have recently joined us, because your support enables us to keep creating these videos that everyone can enjoy. And if you enjoyed it, then hit the like button and comment below to let me know how you got on with that one. And of course, if you never want to miss another video, hit the subscribe button and the little notification bell, and we'll see you again next time. Bye!